Iran solved a problem in 1979 that Western economists said couldn't be solved, and the solution they built is still running today, moving billions of dollars through a system the US Treasury has spent 4 decades trying to shut down. On November 14, 1979, 11 days after Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Jimmy Carter signed Executive Order 12170. With one signature, he froze $12 billion in Iranian assets held in American banks. It was the largest state asset freeze in history at that point. Washington's calculation was straightforward: cut Iran off from the dollar system, and the revolutionary government would either capitulate or collapse. Neither happened. What happened instead was that Iran spent the next 4 decades building a parallel financial architecture, piece by piece, sanction by sanction, not out of ideology, out of necessity. Every time Washington closed a door, Tehran built a window. Every time OFAC designated a new Iranian front company, 3 more appeared. Every time a European bank pulled out of Tehran under U.S. pressure, a new correspondent relationship quietly opened somewhere in Kuala Lumpur or Minsk or Dubai. The result is not a workaround. It is a system. And understanding how that system works tells you more about the future of global finance than anything happening on Wall Street right now. Here are the 5 structures Iran built to survive economic isolation, and why the West's 40-year effort to dismantle them keeps failing. You see, the sanctions regime against Iran is not one thing. It is a geological formation, layer upon layer of executive orders, UN Security Council resolutions, and congressional statutes laid down over 4 decades, each one responding to the last Iranian adaptation. The original 1979 freeze targeted dollar assets. Iran adapted. The 1984 state sponsor of terrorism designation closed U.S. arms exports. Iran adapted. The 1996 Iran-Libya Sanctions Act targeted foreign investment in Iranian oil. Iran adapted. The 2012 Comprehensive Iran Sanctions, Accountability, and Divestment Act, combined with Iran's exclusion from SWIFT in the same year, was supposed to be the killing blow. Iran adapted. By the time the Trump administration reimposed sanctions after withdrawing from the JCPOA in May 2018 and added 1,500 new designations to the OFAC list between 2018 and 2021, they were not sanctioning a country that had just discovered it was under pressure. They were sanctioning a country with 40 years of institutional memory for surviving exactly this. The economic cost is real and should not be minimized. The Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that sanctions cost Iran between $50 billion and $100 billion and lost oil revenue between 2012 and 2025 alone. The Iranian rial lost more than 60% of its value in the 8 months following the 2012 SWIFT exclusion. Inflation peaked at 45% in 2013. Unemployment climbed above 12% and stayed there. Ordinary Iranians absorb punishment that the government was specifically designed to avoid. But here's what the economic damage data does not show. It does not show the volume of oil Iran continued to export through unofficial channels during peak sanctions pressure. It does not show the $100 billion in assets the Obama administration acknowledged Iran had accumulated abroad by 2015. Assets that continued moving and compounding even while OFAC worked to freeze them. And it does not show the 5 structural systems Iran built, quietly and methodically, that allowed the government to keep functioning, keep funding proxies, and keep pursuing its nuclear program through the worst years of economic isolation. Those 5 systems are what this script is about. And the first one is the one Washington has never fully understood. System 1, the hawala network. Long before Iran had a sanctions problem, it had a diaspora. The Iranian Revolution sent roughly 4 million Iranians abroad between 1979 and 1984. They settled in Los Angeles, Toronto, London, Dubai, Frankfurt. They built businesses, and they needed to move money back home to families, to property, to investments, in a country that the formal banking system had already decided was untouchable. Hawala filled that space. Hawala is an informal value transfer system with roots in medieval Islamic trade finance. It operates on trust and debt netting between brokers, called hawaladars. No money physically crosses a border. A family in Tehran contacts a hawaladar in their city, gives him the equivalent of $5,000 in rials, and names a recipient in Toronto. The Tehran hawaldar calls his Toronto counterpart. The Toronto broker pays out the equivalent in Canadian dollars. The two brokers settle their running balance later through trade invoices, commodities, gold, or reverse transfers. No SWIFT message. No SWIFT message. No correspondent bank. No paper trail that US Treasury can follow. What Iran did after 1979 was take this ancient system and scale it to state finance. By the time the 2012 SWIFT exclusion landed, the Iranian government had a network of hawaladar relationships running through the UAE, Turkey, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan that could move hundreds of millions of dollars in a single week without touching a Western correspondent bank. The Congressional Research Service documented in a 2013 report that Iranian entities were using hawaladars in Dubai and Istanbul as primary conduits for oil revenue collection. One Turkish gold trader, Reza Zarrab, became the public face of this system when he was arrested in the U.S. in 2016 and turned state's witness. His testimony revealed that between 2012 and 2016, he processed approximately $12 billion in transactions for the Iranian government, converting oil revenues into gold, then into Turkish lira, then into euros, all while OFAC's designated entity lists grew longer and longer. Zarrab was one node. The network had hundreds. System 2, the front company archipelago. In February 2023, OFA designated a network of 49 entities across 10 countries that it said were helping Iran evade oil sanctions. The announcement was presented as a significant enforcement action. It was also, quietly, a demonstration of the scale of the problem, because 49 entities across 10 countries is not a conspiracy. It is an ecosystem. And ecosystems do not get dismantled by enforcement actions. They absorb them. Iran's front company architecture works on a simple principle: distance and deniability. An Iranian oil cargo does not travel directly from Karg Island to a Chinese refinery. It travels to a ship-to-ship transfer point, often in the waters off Malaysia or Oman or Fujairah. There, the cargo is transferred to a vessel registered to a company in the Marshall Islands or Panama, crewed by nationals from a third country, flying a flag of convenience from Palau or Tuvalu, and managed by a logistics firm whose paper ownership traces back to a shelf company in Hong Kong. By the time the oil reaches its final destination, it has legally become something else. The data confirms the scale. Kepler, the shipping analytics firm, tracked Iranian crude exports in 2022 at approximately 11 million barrels per day, the highest level since 2018 reimposition of sanctions. The official OPEC figure for Iran's exports was considerably lower. The gap between the two numbers is the front company archipelago, measured in barrels. System 3, the gold bridge. In the immediate aftermath of the 2012 SWIFT exclusion, Iran faced a specific, concrete problem. It had oil buyers in Asia willing to pay. It had no mechanism to receive payment in a currency it could use. Turkey provided the bridge. Between 2012 and 2013, Turkish gold exports to Iran increased from $54 million annually to $6.4 billion. This was not a jewelry boom. This was state-level financial engineering. Iran was accepting payment for oil in Turkish lira, a currency it could use domestically, and Turkey was converting the accumulated lira into gold bullion for transfer to Iran. The gold moved physically in ways that did not require the SWIFT network, through Dubai and through direct diplomatic shipments. Turkish government officials at the time defended the arrangement as legal under a temporary exemption in U.S. sanctions law. The exemption expired in July 2013. The gold transfers slowed, but the architecture remained, and when Iran needed it again, it was there. Meet Daryush and Sapidat Kashani. Daryush is a composite constructed from documented cases reported in the Iranian financial press and U.S. Treasury enforcement filings. He ran a mid-sized import-export business in Isfahan in 2012, moving industrial equipment between Iran, Turkey, and the UAE. When the SWIFT exclusion hit in March 2012, his Turkish suppliers stopped accepting payment through Iranian banks. His Dubai-based freight broker stopped returning calls. What Dariush did next is what thousands of Iranian business people did simultaneously, without coordination, as a matter of survival. He opened a trading account with a hawala in Istanbul he had used informally for years. He began settling transactions in gold. He restructured his company's invoicing to run through a UAE trading entity his cousin had registered in 2009 and never fully activated. Within 6 months, his supply chain was operating again, not through the formal system, through the system Iran had been quietly building since 1979. Sepideh, his wife, managed the family's savings. She had already converted 70% of their liquid assets into gold coins called Bahar Azadi coins in 2010, before the SWIFT exclusion, because inflation had been running above 20%, and the rial had already lost half its value against the dollar over the previous decade. When the rial collapsed in 2012, their gold savings held value in dollar terms, while neighbors who had kept rial savings watched their purchasing power disappear. Their story is not exceptional. It is the median outcome for an Iranian middle-class family with any financial literacy at all. The adaptation was not sophisticated, it was old. Iran had done this before. System 4, the cryptocurrency layer. Crypto arrived late to Iran's sanctions evasion toolkit, but it arrived with serious backing. In 2019, the Iranian government formally licensed cryptocurrency mining as an industrial activity in part because mining provided a mechanism to convert subsidized Iranian electricity, which the government priced far below international market rates, into digital assets that could be used for international trade. By 2020, Iran was estimated to account for approximately 4–5% of global Bitcoin mining capacity, according to data from the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. The government was using mined Bitcoin directly to pay for imports from countries willing to accept it, primarily China and Russia, bypassing the dollar system entirely. Chainalysis documented in its 2022 crypto crime report that Iran-linked entities received over $8 billion in cryptocurrency between 2019 and 2022. Not all of that was sanctions evasion. Some was domestic speculation, but the directional logic is clear. When the formal financial system is closed, the pseudonymous, borderless properties of cryptocurrency become genuinely useful, not as ideology, but as infrastructure. System 5, the bilateral trade architecture. The fifth system is the least visible and the most durable. Iran, unable to use the dollar or access Western correspondent banks, has spent 40 years building direct bilateral trade relationships denominated in local currencies with countries that have reasons of their own to avoid the dollar system. The clearest current example is the Iran-China relationship. China became Iran's largest trading partner in 2010. By 2021, the two countries had signed a 25-year cooperation agreement covering $400 billion in Chinese investment in Iranian infrastructure and energy in exchange for discounted Iranian oil. The payments mechanism does not touch the dollar. It runs through a combination of renminbi accounts, barter arrangements, and local currency swaps that Iranian and Chinese state banks manage bilaterally. Similar, smaller-scale arrangements exist with Russia, India, Venezuela, and Iraq. Each one represents a node in a trade architecture that Iran has been patiently constructing for 4 decades, specifically because it learned in 1979 that dollar dependency is a vulnerability. What most people miss about Iran's 40-year financial survival is the direction of causality. The standard Western policy narrative runs like this. Sanctions impose costs. Costs create pressure. Pressure forces concessions. The 2015 JCPOA is presented as proof that this sequence works. Iran agreed to nuclear limits. Sanctions were lifted. The system functioned as designed. What the data actually shows is something more complicated. Iran's nuclear program was more advanced in 2015 than it was in 2003, when the first serious sanctions pressure was applied. Iran's regional influence, measured by the number of proxy forces it funds across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, expanded continuously throughout the sanctions decade, and the financial infrastructure Iran built to survive sanctions did not get dismantled when the JCPOA lifted restrictions. It went dormant. It waited. When the Trump administration reimposed sanctions in 2018, Iran did not have to rebuild its evasion architecture. It reactivated it. The ghost tanker network spun back up within months. The hawala corridors reopened. The Chinese bilateral arrangements deepened. OFAC added designations. The architecture absorbed them. There is a deeper problem here that no one in Washington has been willing to state plainly. Sanctions work best against countries that are financially integrated into the system you control. Iran was deeply integrated in 1979, which is why Carter's asset freeze hit so hard. But each subsequent sanction pushed Iran further outside the system, building capability and relationships that reduce its dependence on that system for the future. By 2024, Iran is less financially integrated with the West than at any point since the revolution. That means future sanctions have less leverage, not more. The 40-year campaign has not been futile in human terms. Ordinary Iranians have paid a devastating price in purchasing power, access to medicine, and economic opportunity, but measured against its stated goal, which was to change Iranian government behavior through financial pressure. The campaign has produced the opposite of what it intended. It has produced a government with 40 years of experience defeating it, and a population with 40 years of experience surviving it. That is not a failure of execution. It is a failure of theory. The reason this history matters right now is Russia. When Russia was excluded from SWIFT in February 2022, the immediate Western commentary framed it as an unprecedented financial weapon, and measured by speed and scale, it was. But measured by the sophistication of the target, it was not a knockout punch landing on a naive opponent. It was a known playbook, landing on a government that had been watching Iran run it for 20 years and had been preparing its own version since at least 2014, when Crimea triggered the first round of Western financial restrictions. Russia had a domestic alternative to SWIFT called SPFS already operational. It had been quietly expanding renminbi settlement with China. It had relationships with hawala networks in Central Asia. It had gold reserves that represented roughly 22% of total foreign exchange holdings, built up specifically to reduce dollar exposure after 2014. The Peterson Institute's sanctions tracker shows that Russia's oil export revenues in 2023, the first full year under comprehensive Western sanctions, were lower than 2022, but not catastrophically so. The mechanism was the same as Iran's: ghost tankers, third country intermediaries, bilateral trade in non-dollar currencies, and a shadow fleet that Lloyd's of London estimated at over 600 vessels by late 2023. What Iran built over 40 years, Russia partially reconstructed in 18 months, because it had the blueprint. For investors and financially literate observers trying to understand where this goes, the Iranian case offers a specific prediction. Sanctions rarely produce the political outcomes they promise, but they reliably produce financial innovation in the target country and financial fragmentation globally. Every sanctions regime accelerates the construction of dollar alternative infrastructure, and that infrastructure does not disappear when the sanctions eventually lift or ease. It persists. It waits. It becomes the foundation of whatever comes next. Iran's shadow financial system is 40 years old. It is not going away, and the countries currently watching it closely are not its adversaries. They are its students.